Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode number 12 in the book of 1 Timothy. Yesterday we talked about fighting like a Christian, and we're going through some characteristics of eldership and pastorship. And that person should be not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, and not lovers of money. And we asked the quirky question, has any lasting legacy of spiritual benefit ever been produced by someone with a jet? So today, we're going to continue the qualifications for a elder overseer in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verses 4 and 5. I will read now. He must manage his own household well, with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? So today's title is, what's true in your home, what's true in your house is true in God's house. What's true in your house is true in God's house. So he must manage. Here's the first idea, is there's a scope of authority, and what are the borders of the authority? You're not, when you're born, you're given a role. You're not given a role over the entire universe. It has borders, it has limitations. And so, for example, when you're a father, your border is, or at least one of your borders, is your family. And what this passage is asking is, were you faithful in the small things? Can you be entrusted with something larger? So were you faithful in the care of your family, in the teaching of your family, that you can be entrusted with a bigger family, the family of God? Remember, submission is a beautiful thing. Why is that? Well, you're going to need it in every future Christian venue. Christians submit to one another. Wives submit to husband as to the Lord. Children submit. Workers submit to their bosses. People submit to their governments. Soldiers submit to their captains. It is a life skill, whether you're a student, whether you're a soldier, whether you're a family member. Everybody submits to everybody. So what is submission? Let's review. Submission is the voluntary attachment under a designated person in a defined role that demonstrates the posture of an internal adornment before God. Submission is the voluntary attachment under a designated person in a defined role that demonstrates the posture of an internal adornment before God. All right, so submission is voluntary, first of all. Subjugation is imposed. So submission is something you do to yourself. It's under, that's what the hypotasso, that's what the word means, is putting yourself under this person. It is a designated person in a defined role. So everybody doesn't submit to everybody at all times. Everybody does submit, but everybody doesn't submit to everybody, with the exception of defined people in designated role. And keep this in mind, it's always, always, always before the Lord. You can't do it without a view to God. You can't do it in a Christian way without a view before God. And that is going to demonstrate the posture of an internal adornment before God. So again, always as to the Lord, or for the Lord's sake. In 1 Peter, it says, let your adorning be in the hidden person of the heart, in the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. So submission is demonstrating in relational practice what is true in spiritual reality, that is before God. Francis Chan said, I love being under the authority of God. Good. That means he gets this. All right, so let's talk about Jesus for a second. Jesus submitted to the Father in the garden. He submitted to the Father at the cross. And we have a submitting Savior. So, wives, similarly, you can demonstrate this aspect of Christ. Husbands, similarly, you can demonstrate an aspect of Christ, which is his love for your wife. So how much of an ask is it that we ask submission of our children? So this authority concept can be taught. It can be exampled best in the primary relationship of care and taking care of that a parent does to a child. It's important to know. It's important to function. It basically, submission is a life skill. And, lesson number 1, there is authority. Lesson number 2, you are not it. And eventually, with enough reps and enough practice and enough stewardship and careful demonstration of this, in their little world, by demonstrating submission and understanding with its difficulties and its purposes and its function, this is so important for a child. It's also important for a parent, and absent this, it's almost like you're abdicating your role as a parent if you don't teach your child submission. Why? Because it's important to function in the world, in the home, in the workplace, and without it, you're basically going to be raising a handicapped child. And then if you put the spiritual aspect on it, it's important to function before God. And you're going to be raising handicapped spiritual entities without this concept of submission. So if you took out submission, you'd have to cut out parts of 1 Timothy, Colossians, Ephesians, Philemon, 1 Peter, and the Gospels. Colossians 3:20, children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. It tells me that this, and the fact that this is everywhere in the Bible, tells me that this is a difficult concept and should be best taught first in your home. And do you get this? As far as it depends on a parent, remember, children have their own free will too. But this is a sort of the test for the eldership is going to be asking, does the father get this and demonstrate it in his home, because he's going to need it in the church? So it demonstrates that the elder will be caring best for the church. He's committed to the concept. He's committed to its teaching. He's committing to its functioning. So what's true in your house will be true in God's house. Thanks for listening.